Thank you, Sophie, and thank you very much for the invitation. Thanks, Sophie, and everyone at Morrisons. It's great. We're really delighted to be part of, a really, really positive, energetic, optimistic, opportunity here to make a big difference. I want to say a big thank you, of course, to the Harper team. I have got a role here as well, so it's great to be very much at home. And also, I want to say a big thank you to actually the project farmers and the blueprint farmers. I mean, Paul and Tim are here. I think opening up your farm and opening up, your business is a really big thing to do. So I want to say, it's fantastic. I'm really delighted to work with everybody involved, and so is Angie and the rest of the RAP team. And that extends to everyone involved in this project, so, Map of Ag and the wider participants too. So I'm really pleased to be able to talk about health and fertility, but I am going to just flag that picture because you might have noticed a very famous person on there, because Angus, who spoke before, in terms of sharing your ideas, Angus has opened his farm up as well a lot, and he even ordered the weather for a recent discussion group where we were basically able to kind of look at some of those things. So thank you, Angus, it was good to do that. And I think Tim and Paul, I'm going to very much mention by name, they've pioneered really positive thinking and innovation in what they do. So, guys, it's been great working with you and looking forward to the next steps. As Sophie says, I've been involved in quite a lot of things, both sort of regionally, nationally, internationally. I've got a passion for kind of cows, I can't deny it. I'm unashamedly going to bring this back to kind of cows and the animal. I'm a vet, I love what I do, and I'm really proud of our industry. And I want to make sure that we just connect the cow end of this, and other animals too. They are all available, but I'm a bit of a cow kind of fanatic. So I'm going to unashamedly make those connections, and I do try to make those connections in these wider roles that Sophie talks about all the time. I'm very much kind of an advocate for basically what we're doing and very proud of it. So I've got some wider roles, but also I'm a vet. I've been in practice for the kind of past 26, 27 years. And I'm based in Yorkshire, very much a neighbour of Sophie and Angus and various other people here. Bishop's has been around since 1945. And that picture at the bottom was celebrating our sort of 75th anniversary. Actually, that's the original receptionist. She's the same age as the Queen, so Mrs. Grundy still walks into Ripon every day. She's on her third set of hips, I think. But in terms of sustainability and resilience, she is incredible. And Evie sat next to her. When we celebrate our 75th, she's 75 years younger than her. So she's in the current office team. So making it happen and actually making these things real is very much, I think, our sort of passion. As well as that tradition, though, as Sophie described, RAF was set up to look to the future. It was about what do we need to do from traditional veterinary practice, traditional farming attitudes, potentially, how can we look for innovation? How can we connect those things together? And therefore, 12 years ago now, we've very much kind of brought RAF together, and delighted, obviously, that we kind of look into the future. And it's therefore about looking at new ideas and research, taking it through to knowledge exchange and training and skills at the other end. And we're here with the school, here at Harper as a key opportunity to do that. Let's take the learning and make it happen in practice. So very much about therefore kind of locations both in Yorkshire, but also obviously kind of over here, but also therefore opportunities to make sure these key pillars of the school go out through those RAF connections across the farms in the UK, but also globally. And I'm really pleased being able to have connections and networks where we can share those ideas and innovations, learn from other people, but also understand that we are leading the way in some key parts of sustainability of food. So I want to do two things really, is very conscious of lunch. We talked a lot about food, I've got an appetite, definitely. But I want to basically just briefly set the scene as to why health and fertility is really important. It's something that can be overlooked. The animal end of this is key. So I want to set the scene for why, and I want to share some examples that are UK-based and internationally based as how they make a big difference. And I'm going to go into some more detail in my workshop session this afternoon into some of the how-tos. So, Hugh's here from Map of Ag. I love this slide. It's all about balance. I want to talk about balance. I feel my job is all about trying to achieve balance. And we've looked a lot really at how we've got the opportunities to provide solutions from farming. We can sequester carbon, we can look at lots of ways in terms of soil and land that are positives. But I want to look at the bit where we're breaking the eggs to make the omelette. You know, we are producing food that's incredibly valuable, and therefore we have got emissions associated with it. But we can do a huge amount to make those the minimum that they can be. And so I'm really keen to therefore look at this idea of balance. My role as a vet traditionally was in that animal health and welfare corner of this schematic. That was my day job, that was how I was trained. But I feel now that my job and the job of vets in the livestock sector is spinning that dial. Is for each farm is understanding what the optimal balance is, never forgetting health and welfare, but understanding our responsibilities to produce food sustainably. Food security has never gone out of fashion, but it's certainly pretty prominent and high profile at the moment. But we've got to do it understanding, as Sophie has absolutely led the way, and the Morrisons team here, about doing it with a really understandable impact on the environment, where we manage that in every way. And I'm going to put in a bin in that bottom right-hand corner, because we've got a responsibility about One Health and society as well. We need to reduce our use of antimicrobials, but also understand the diseases that spread from animals to humans too. Because after COVID, the spotlight is very much on how animal health and human health link together. Okay, so we can't get away from consumers, and it was something that Sharon talked about earlier on, you know, that we can't get away from the fact that the products that we make are about understanding that marketplace. And there's been lots published. There's been lots of high-profile things that make a big difference, that the media get hold of, and it creates very, very big media stories. And at Beef Expo a few weeks ago, Sophie did a great talk, and lots of basically highlighted positive messages at Beef Expo at Darlington. But there was quite a bit also of protests. We arrived outside, and people are entitled to protest and demonstrate. That's their democratic right to do that. And I think, therefore, there's different ways to approach it. We can either take them on, basically have an aggressive, response to try and deal with those sort of protests, or we can basically just win these arguments on quality. So essentially, there's no need to, we've managed to persuade the slurry tanker that was appearing on the edge to leave the premises, and instead just cooked great food within kind of a very close range for the whole day. And it's the ultimate kind of breaking the siege, isn't it? If you're cooking those steaks and those burgers all day, I think at the end of the day we won that argument. But we have got to make sure that we've got a good evidence base. Consumers have got choice, and they've got lots of choice. And we need to understand, therefore, that our arguments, and health and fertility is a really key part of this, that we can win the arguments for the consumer battle. There's no doubt COP26 brought about a global methane pledge. There's lots of high profile, as Sharon's talked about very much already, ruminants have got a methane connection. And there's no doubt that there are impacts on the environment from farming. But Angus, and also all our discussions about regenerative farming and multi-sward, we can do lots to remedy it. But we need the data. We need an evidence base to make sure that we can win those arguments, and pieces of research that are peer-reviewed and they get taken by the media. We do need to win the arguments. And it's really important, again, that's what Hugh and the Map of Ag team are doing in the project. They are gathering real data from your farms. And what's a real challenge is to make sure then we connect that with how important our food is, and understand what food security really means. So headlines full about food strategies, and obviously, because of devolved matters, this is just one aspect of the UK food picture. But there are things in there that we need to pick out and work with, and understand how we can make sure that we make the most of the opportunities and win some of those discussions around the importance of livestock farming. Because I'm going to get into health and fertility next, but this starting point is about resilience. I spent the last 5 years in a Europe-wide research project looking at resilience for climate change of the cattle population across Europe, from Poland to Italy to Spain to Ireland to Denmark. And it's all about saying, what breeding do we want? We need to plan ahead for animals that will both cope with climate change, but also will reduce the impacts on climate and the environment. And it's a massive opportunity bringing together all these different countries and ideas, and it is so positive to see we have got the tools to do this. Okay, so I want to get into just, really sort of 10-15 minutes before we will finish. Just look at a bit of detail, and I'm going to go into some practical bits of this in the workshop. But the key message is that improving health and fertility reduces emissions. It's a really massive aspect of emissions intensity management. So if we go back to that balance point, there's some great work out there. We've got some information being published all the time at the moment. Rumen Health and Welfare Group's published a load of great work on methane recently, and Nigel Miller in Scotland's led that work with the Safari team up there. We've got CL produced a great bit of work a couple of years ago, and then recently looking at how we can reduce emissions as well. So we've got toolkits that are emerging to help us do this. But what I want to pull out of some of these reports is actually the detail on the health and fertility bits is often missing. And we've got some great bits of data here about how we can improve what's going on with emissions intensity in beef and in lamb and in pork and eggs. But actually, we've still got a big part of this is enteric emissions. A big part of that impact is around feeding, and a big part of our opportunities around growth rates and actually how we get to that finished product. And yet I spend all my time seeing how disease and infertility and inappropriate genetic choices robs us of the best performance. I can see farms which have got very good handles on disease that get fantastic feed conversion efficiency. James's talk this morning was brilliant. It looked at how we need to look at different ways of thinking about how we're looking at modelling protein nutrition. But also we've got to understand that all that feed conversion efficiency is hammered if we've got disease in herds. And if we've got really inefficient fertility and reproductive performance, we give away lots of efficiencies. We have to put more food in to get to the same place. And also, genetics has been a massive part of the gain in the monogastric sector, but our extensive ruminant sectors lag behind. We need to make sure that we look at some of the gain that's there in genetics, and to do that we need good breeding management. We need to be able to take advantage of the very best genetics globally to make us produce that sustainable food product that we want. That doesn't work if a bull is infertile. It doesn't work if we're AIing the semen that isn't any good. And it doesn't work if we can't manage nutrition and health so that we don't get very good conception rates. So we've got to look at all these different bits of potential together. So we've got an opportunity to look at sort of 37% mitigation in this recent CL report. But looking at those 8 measures on there, I see at least half of them have been about health and fertility. The number of calves we successfully rear means the ones that don't die, the ones that don't get pneumonia, the ones that grow successfully. I see the bits here about reducing age of first calf into 2 years, breeding choices. It's about genetics. It's about really good reproductive management. But yet we don't have that health and fertility tag next to them. And we've got to understand, therefore, what are the practical steps that we can do to hit these targets. And that's very much what this Net Zero project is doing on a farm-by-farm basis. So, here's the magic. I know it's a horrible-looking graph before lunch. But again, this is an ADAS piece of work. It was an ADAS-led DEFRA project that I was on the steering group, and I was coordinating the data inputs from the veterinary farming sector. What this is saying is it took the top 10 cattle diseases in the UK, a popular vote. I think it was an audience vote as well as the kind of panel. but basically the top 10 diseases with the most impact. And these are from liver fluke through to BVD, through to kind of pneumonia in calves. And what it did was, it looked at the commonly available strategies to manage them. From vaccination, better building management, for example, with pneumonia, together with key bits around grazing management for parasites. It took those, costed them out, and we looked on farm data that we had at the benefits. And what that graph is saying is that basically everything below that line, so nearly everything on that basically left-hand side, they are all basically cost benefits. So there's a return on investment for all those things that basically, other than the few on the right-hand side, where there might be a net initial investment. And the width of those bars is basically how much carbon mitigation there is for doing those things. So the key message is there's the win-win here for better health and fertility of it's cost effective for the bottom line of the business, and it mitigates significant amounts of carbon. I'll come back to that. So basically John Elliott and the team at ADAS led that piece of work. So this is back to the day job. So we can somehow balance up these different demands. And I'm going to pick a few things out, I'm going into some more detail, but I'm dividing these into breeding, feeding and disease control. And by breeding, I'm really looking at the long-term genetic improvements for making the right bull choices and the right AI choices, but also efficient breeding too. So also looking at how we can make sure that we're getting breeding within the early part of the breeding season, so we've got the most effective use of grass and resources. Looking at feeding, making sure that the cost in terms of variable costs of the business and the bottom line have soared. So therefore making the most efficient use of those is crucially about balancing up those input costs with a healthy rumen microbiome. As Sharon's Sharon's taught again, I've loved working with Sharon these last few years because Sharon's from a farming background and basically an international leader in basically what's going on with this. The rumen microbiome is the most incredible bit of engineering we will ever see. You can't design something of that complexity where we can put food in that we can't eat at one end and get high quality protein out the other. It doesn't get any better. But we can break it. We can break it. If we overdo it in terms of feeds or we use supplements the wrong way, we can make that engine run less well. And then finally, the disease control parts. A recent publication from NOAA, we just basically looked at a whole load of vaccine strategies. Uptake of vaccines and prevention is still frighteningly low, particularly in parts of beef and sheep sector. We can do a lot more to basically prevent disease. And that's important because this is some data from Hugh and the Map of Ag team, from Morrisons Project Farms, and those two bars at the top show the difference in emissions intensity from a batch of animals with liver fluke on a farm and a batch of animals that don't have fluke. And we actually took those livers from woodheads and we looked at them and we saw the fluke in there. We tracked it right the way through. And I think Angie's kind of car still smells from those livers that we transported around. So we can connect disease impacts with emissions impact. And we've therefore got a strong argument here to get ahead of it. So that benefit of those diseases, we tested it out. So RAF's been part of a number of projects, and I'm just going to summarise just two briefly. So the first of them was on UK farms. We basically, together with colleagues at Cranfield, we looked at efficient reproduction and genetics. We looked at getting rid of BVD on these beef farms and dairy farms too. And we looked at improving calf pneumonia through vaccination, better building management and ventilation assessments. And what that gave us was these improvements in warming potential. And all the ones on the left are basically reductions in global warming, and those little red slithers on the right are the impact costs of doing it. So those veterinary and farmer interventions have the red slivers of impact, and all the stuff on the left is the benefit. So if we get rid of BVD on a beef farm, we're looking at around 14% benefit in warming potential. It's huge. And it's also there as a win-win for the bottom line as well. But the costs of doing it are really small in comparison. And if we look at this, moving equipment to test things around, exactly as we've talked about today and Hannah talked about, there are costs for all the things that we do. But if we make a good breeding decision with an easy calving bull, and therefore we don't lose a dead cow or a dead calf, saving the calf saves 0.5 ton of carbon, saving the cow and the calf saves 3.5 tons of carbon. These are big ticket items to get right in what we do. But the information's not out there. And so we were commissioned by the UN to basically look at the benefits of these health and fertility changes in the UK, but also in Chile and in Kenya. And I'm going to go this very quickly, but basically in Madrid in 2019, we presented this work showing actually that we can model and we can measure the benefits of better health and fertility. And it was something the FAO commissioned because there wasn't the evidence base. And if we look at fertility performance, getting rid of infectious diseases, then we can measure the benefit in a way that when we go out to farm, we can connect that improved performance with that improvement in global warming potential. And particularly things like BVD. There's great work being done in Scotland, Ireland, and parts of Europe, but not universally. It's still a frighteningly big problem in lots of places. So this methodology was all about looking at life cycle assessment of everything that went in and everything that went out, but looking at the benefit of better health and fertility. And on the worst 10% performing herds, just these standard measures of using good heat detection, PDing and removing empty animals early, but also looking at technology, we can look at 30 to 40% reductions in emissions intensity by taking the 10% worst performing herds and putting those measures in place. And that's across different countries, but it's also about a cost benefit too. It's not just about the carbon cost, it's also stacks up economically to do it. So just drawing these final bits kind of around really as a kind of last laps. I want to connect feeding with everything because the rumen is so important in this discussion. It represents such a big part of the benefits when we get health and fertility right, but it also represents that enteric emissions hit if we don't do things well. Now, Sharon got a great video of the rumen microbiome, but I want to show you a good one and a bad one, because I see my role as a vet is trying to produce precision decision making and get health right on a farm by farm basis. And if we have a rumen that's working really well, the same with Sharon's video, we've got a microbiome there which we can potentially put supplements into that and understand how we can fine tune all the benefits. But if we look at the left-hand side, don't get motion sick with the right, by the way, but that left-hand side is a sick rumen. It's a rumen that's had too much cereal, that's basically had too much concentrate, it's got rumen acidosis, and it is hammered how well that rumen performs. So we've got to get this balance right in terms of health, fertility, and that extends to nutrition too. If you've not read anything that Tim Spector has produced, by the way, it's worth a look, because one of his big messages is about multi-sward humans, is about the diversity of species that we feed. There are big measurable benefits. And he's looked at genetics and giving the same number of calories to twins all around the world, but particularly UK and in the States. And actually, if we can manage the microbiome well, we get very effective feed conversion in healthy people as well as healthy humans. And Angus's mixed swards are absolutely in tune with what a lot of human research is showing about that diversity too. And precision means that we've got to look at how we individually manage cows, herds, and don't look at blanket treatments. And James's comment earlier was spot on. can we apply lower levels of crude protein, look at metabolizable protein, and maybe look at precision amino acids, bolus delivery of feeds as well as supplements. So my final bit, so because I'm conscious of the time, is I've talked about precision a lot, and sorry James, I know you said that you hated precision earlier on. A lot of these kind of bits of jargon get overused, but blanket approaches are a problem because it means we're using too much for lots of animals in herds, and we maybe aren't using enough for others. And the more we can use precision approaches, first of all, we reduce waste, but also we get the best performance from both health and fertility. And I do see the pig and poultry sector using technology in a fantastic way, and I very much now see the dairy sector doing the same. And we're beginning to catch up in the beef sector, and sheep will follow, and we are starting to get there as well. But what it means is that the opportunity to use technology as those costs come down become key. If we can save some of the input costs on feed and fertiliser, it starts to pay for investment in tech remarkably quickly. And there's going to be grant programmes out there to do that in the next 2 years. It's a big opportunity. And Erin's here with the FECPAT team as well, making sure that we only use those very, very challenging, difficult chemicals to deal with parasites when we need to is really important. You know, if we look at how we can protect the microbiome and how we can reduce the impact on everything from dung beetles by not blanket treating stuff, but we need the diagnostics to know when we do need to use them. Otherwise, animal welfare will suffer. So we've got this balance to manage. I think technology is a key part of it, but also so is training. And I think in turning this kind of dial of what goes on, we've got to get good education about breeding approaches and genetics. We've got to get lots of good training about those new ways of looking at feeding that James talked about. And also, we've got an awful lot to do in terms of disease control before we've used everything that we can. The School of Sustainable Food and Farming, linked together with RAFT's Farm Skills Network, is a way to get the message out there. And what RAFT is doing is also training networks of vets, so that together with other advisors, we've got champions in different parts of the country, and we're running kind of vet training courses, and therefore making sure that we've got a really good approach where the vets and the farmers and the nutritionists and the geneticists, we're all working together to give this best picture of advice about what sustainable food really looks like. So I'm going to stop there. So I'm conscious that we've got to basically run into dinner, but I just want to say I really love cows, and like I feel so proud to have been able to go out and look at some amazing farms. So thank you all for opening your doors to me and the team. But we've got to get the message out there about how well we're doing. So thank you all.